Alarm Media.
8:40 exactly, and welcome back to the show. News and Views with me, Julie Ali, and we are now going to bring up memories of Black Wednesday. 44 years ago, on the 19th of October 1977, a day also known as Black Wednesday, the apartheid regime clamped down on resistance. Newspapers, activists, and numerous organizations were banned, and journalists were jailed. So starts our memories of Black Wednesday. What did it mean then? What does it mean now? And does it still have relevance in this day and age? A founding member with Steve Biko of the Black Consciousness Movement, obviously is none other than Dr. Saths Cooper, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome him to the show this morning. Welcome, and wonderful to have you on air.
Thank you for having me.
Lots and lots of memories, undoubtedly, 44 years later, of Black Wednesday. Where were you at the time? What was going through your mind? And how horrified were you when this Black Wednesday clamped down, or rather when the regime clamped down on resistance and obviously activists and media in general?
Well, I only heard about this about 2 days later. I was in Robben Island, serving a sentence in the same cell block with former President Mandela and other prisoners after the trial where I was first accused with, SARS BPC trial that ran from January 75 to December 76. I think we need to also understand that this occurred, the banning of 19 organizations, well more than half of the total 33 organizations that were banned by the apartheid regime, resulted in various events, the events of the early 70s leading up to June 16th, then the murder of Steve Biko, and within weeks, the organizations were banned, and the World and Sunday World were banned, and one Christian Institute newsletter. So we need to also appreciate, Julie, that at the time there was a very right-wing apartheid media industry. It still exists as News 24. There was a liberal media, the Sunday Times group and the what's now the Independent Newspapers group. They existed in the main. Then there was a few smaller entities. We're talking the print media because the airways were, there was no television. It was not allowed until, just after 76 television began. So until then, the media was controlled by these forces. So the narrative was one of white is right, white constitutes the ownership of the country. The black majority were seriously diminished in that space. So what we find is that the media itself created the term Black Wednesday and arrogated unto itself the issue of media freedom. Whereas 19 organizations that filled the gap when the ANC and PAC were banned in 1960, these organizations came up from the late 60s into the 70s. These organizations were banned, and they've never, ever been accorded that right, of recognition. And it continues to today because it suits the ruling party to diminish their own role. I mean, Cyril Ramaphosa was a student at that time. Because Azana Zuma was a student at that time. So it suited almost the right wing, the liberal media, as well as the Stalinist position on media. Having said that, I think what we do need to do is celebrate the opening of the airways, the preponderance of multi entities in all spaces in the media, electronic as well as print, which is diminishing fast. But we need to cherish the fact that we have, I mean, the very fact that we have Salam media in existence, and it
And Alhamdulillah for that.
yes, because look, the quest for humanitarian journalism is the leitmotif of Salam Media. Now, that would not be happening if it weren't for all these developments. So I think we need to be thankful that that's happened, but I think we need to also recognize that we perhaps in the worst state in our country ever. Social media has gone seriously awry. We have a few more days before our election, and we have a plethora of voices, but at the same time, our people are worse off than ever before, and the exposure of that condition, I think, most of our media is bereft of. We have media like yourselves constantly looking at those who are worse off than ourselves, because if we don't, then our own claim to humanity gets undermined, because we cannot see suffering humanity around us and not attempt to turn that around when most people would like to ignore it, deny it, and just carry on with their own lives. But it's such that humanity is connected, and we do need to reflect on our condition. We also need to reflect on how we got here and how we allowed ourselves to be ravaged in this way, in order that going forward, the majority of your listeners, majority of our people out there, and especially young people, do not inherit this kind of chaos.
Okay, so Dr. Cooper, I need to ask you 2 or 3 questions before we wrap up, and we've got about 3 minutes to wrap up. You are a practicing psychologist. Are you still involved in politics? How do you, when we go back in history, we know that you as a student at the time, through campus politics, frequently met with Steve Biko, Harry Nengwe Kulu, Srini Mudli, and Bani Petiana. And it was through these discussions that the philosophy of black consciousness emerged. Undoubtedly, you're very proud of that, but you have some very strong views about your conscientization with being in constant contact with these heroes of emancipation. How do you compare today's politicians with those consciousness leaders or activists way back then? And how do you view the political scenario today?
Plain answer, actually, is we've got a bunch of rogues and robbers. We do not have the nobility of the kind of persons you're talking about. Steve Biko was murdered in detention on the 12th of September 1977. They thought they will bury him and his ideas. Those ideas proliferate all around us. You will see groupings, the Fees Must Fall group, for instance, the Fallist movement relied on some of the force, but just shibboleths, slogans. Bani Pichana is around, Harry Nengokulu is around, Srini Mudli died a few years ago. But that group of leaders have formed themselves into the 70s group. That period that Mandela described as the felt fire that spread throughout the country. So we have organized ourselves into a group of persons looking at what's happening and availing ourselves to communities on reconstruction, on helping them to cope with the devastation of mismanagement, of self-aggrandizement, as well as the pandemic, which is with us for a while now. So we are attempting to continue doing community-based work. We try to assist government wherever we can without compromising ourselves, because government can easily co-opt you into one of the clack of persons who just says "Yabas" and continues. And we do not have that commitment. We do not have that compassion. We do not have that caring for our society. We hear it in the run-up to an election or some campaign, but immediately thereafter you hear nothing. There's a continuation of thundering of people's money, of the state. I mean, it's shocking that in papers that the government presented in December last year in opposing the unions on their pay freeze, acknowledged that 2/3 the total budget of the government goes to salary. Now, that's untenable. That's why we're in junk status. And if we use lockdown level language, I think we're in level 4, failed state, stage 1. And
absolutely.
to really look at the fact that, this election, Julie, we have 1,482, I think, political parties formed when there are only, 278 municipalities, and those are going to reduce further from next year. It tells you that people look at politics as the new economic activity.
Absolutely.
They're a total drain on all of us. And it's about time that we have citizen action, not narrow political views prevailing, because our people need to claim back their space, their agency, in order to see their mission on earth as the higher being required.
Okay, Dr. Saths Cooper, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Always a pleasure talking to you, and go well as we remember Black Wednesday and you and your colleagues. God be with you, and thank you for your time. 8:53 exactly.
Every 60 seconds,